I have a rule to never interrupt Leonard Cohen, so we had to wait. Thank you very much. Please welcome the director of the film, Esther Takac. And on behalf of New Yorker Jewish Agenda, please welcome Nancy Kaufman to lead the conversation. Thank you both.
Thank you. Wow. Wow. Esther, that was beautiful. First of all, let me say a shout out to the Parent Circle, bereaved families, and Robbie Danlin, and the Combatants for Peace, two of my most favorite organizations for them. And if anyone's here who's part of those organizations, they're very special. I'm here in place of wonderful director of New York Jewish Agenda, Felisa Wisdom, who wasn't feeling well tonight, so couldn't make it. So I have the honor and privilege of being able to moderate this. And I'm also wearing the hat of a board member of the International Alliance for Middle East Peace, of which both these organizations are members. And I will, on a hopeful note, begin by saying so are 158 other organizations, believe it or not, who are doing cross-border and shared society work. So it is possible. Oh, wow. So that was a beautiful, beautiful film. I really, it's the first time I've seen it, and it's just beautiful. It's gorgeous. So let me start by asking you, what made you decide to make the film?
Okay, well, I'm not a filmmaker. This is my first film.
Oh,
I'm a child and adult psychologist by my day job. And just as an aside, people choose to be psychologists because they like to speak one-to-one. They don't want to speak to big crowds of people. So anyway, and I've always had a very strong connection to Israel. My husband's over there. We both did our masters in psychology at the Hebrew University and lived there. And for various diaspora Jew reasons, we had to go back to Australia. But I kept a very strong contact, and I went and I worked voluntarily as a consultant psychologist at Hadassah Hospital, the hospital where Smadar was born and where Abia died. And I worked there a month a year over 12 years, and it was during that time in 2017 that I first went to the bereaved families ceremony, and I was so blown away by it. I felt it was so important and so powerful that I felt they needed a bigger voice, that people across the world needed to know about them, and that people in Israel and the Palestinian territories need to know about them as well. Because then and still now, I see them as a model for all of us for dealing with trauma in our lives, for dealing with conflict, for becoming the best version of ourselves, really.
I can't believe it's your first film. Truth be told, I don't know if that was the 2022 or 2023 filming of that, because I was at the 2023 one, which was unbelievably moving, of the joint ceremony.
Oh, we were there. 2023. No, we were there this year, 2024.
No, where were you? When were you filming? Must have been 2023.
No, it wasn't. At the ceremony,
Yeah.
It was 2018, 19,
Oh, okay. All right. It's if you haven't done it, it's the most beautiful, moving thing.
But it is available on Zoom now.
Yes, it is available on Zoom.
I think it's considered the biggest peace gathering in the world, with I think it's 250,000 people who join in on Zoom.
Yeah, and 10,000 who actually are there in person.
Yes.
So you mentioned you're a trauma psychologist. How do you account for the way the people in the film have responded to the trauma?
Well, as a trauma psychologist, I know that trauma affects your body, your mind, and your spirit. It affects your body. You become hyper-aroused, hyper-vigilant, overreactive, jittery. And Bushra speaks a bit about how her body fell apart. I mean, there's some of the effects of trauma. There's lots of other ones. But Bushra kind of really tells us how her body fell apart. And Maytal tells us how that screen went down after her father's funeral, and which is kind of really an amazing description of what psychologists would call disassociation. It also affects your mind. You kind of can't think straight after trauma. You have flashbacks, you have nightmares. Your thinking becomes much more rigid and black and white and not abstract or nuanced, which sadly I think we're seeing today on the part of the Netanyahu government and their response to October the 7th. So I think we really see the effect of trauma on the people. And in a sense, the film follows their journeys through my lens as a trauma psychologist from shock and depression and anger to this change. So the other thing that's become known over the last few decades is this awareness of something called post-traumatic growth, that some people, we all know about post-traumatic stress disorder, but that some people after trauma can develop strengths that they didn't have before. They have changes in their beliefs, they have a renewed appreciation of life, a renewed sense of their own strengths. And I think that's what we really see in these four people. When I was trying to understand how they managed to do what they do, that was the answer I came up with, that they kind of had this post-traumatic growth happening.
So that leads me to another question I want to ask you. So in the process of doing the film, were there any aha moments? What did you learn from that you didn't expect to learn from interviewing them?
I want to go back a little bit because I don't know if we'll cover it also, because there's the effect of trauma on individuals and there's also the effect of trauma on societies. I think trauma affects societies as well. So we all know that conflict causes trauma, but trauma causes conflict as well. The more people are traumatized, the more they are hyper-aroused and not thinking straight, and it can lead to more conflict.
Well,
and
let me just pick up on that note then. So you've got two traumatized societies.
We do,
right?
Yes.
In terms of both Israel and Palestinians, in terms of the history, in terms of the pre-1948 history, the post-1948 history. So they're carrying, those societies are carrying the trauma, and now, of course, with October 7th. So how did that play into what the experience was of meeting with them and talking with them and their own particular trauma? Again, I'm just curious if there was anything that surprised you as you were interviewing, anything you learned from it or learned from them?
I'll talk about the things I learned from them, but in terms of the layers of trauma, Rami talks about his experiences in 1973 in the Yom Kippur War, and that was one of my dilemmas being a filmmaker and a psychologist at the same time, because when he said, we saw in the film that he still has nightmares, he wakes up sweating with nightmares from that war where he lost a lot of his close friends, I'm in dilemma as to what do I do now? Like, he's telling me about his trauma. We did stop the camera rolling and spoke about what he could do, but that was definitely an issue or conflict in a way as a filmmaker and a psychologist, because I really felt I was pushing people to revisit their pain, but they were also telling me that telling their stories had a lot of meaning for them and that they wanted to do that. So it was a very fine line, didn't want to exploit their pain or sensationalize or re-traumatize them in any way. But I've lost the thread.
The learning.
So what I learned, I think these four people are amazing people, and there are only four out of an organisation of hundreds. There are many others I could have done this film about. I learned from them that as much as they went through their own terrible pain, and we see that, they are still able to see the pain of the other, and seeing the pain of the other doesn't take away the validity of my pain. I learned how important grassroots, people-to-people peace building is. Like, I guess I'd always kind of heard of that, but I never took it that seriously somehow. But I think I really saw that it is important and it can create change. We see that on the individual levels. We see that Bassam didn't really believe the Holocaust had happened, and he then met Rami's father, who calls himself, a graduate of the Auschwitz. And Bassam now stands on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, at that siren. So that's kind of a personal change. And Bushra, we see her change. So the power of people-to-people peace building. I mean, I guess I personally saw how those dialogue workshops changed people, how Rami and Bassam's talks to Palestinian and Israeli high school students changed them. For many of those kids, it was the first time they met a Palestinian or an Israeli. Part of the problem with the separation wall, which really has reduced terrorist attacks, is that Israelis and Palestinians don't see each other in their normal humanity. Palestinians usually see Israelis as settlers or soldiers, and Israelis see Palestinians as suicide bombers, so they don't see them having picnics with their kids or looking after their elderly. So that contact is really important. They've done studies about the bereaved families programs and found that participants in them had an 80% change in their attitudes towards the other. So I think they really do change. I guess another thing that we know is in Northern Ireland and in South Africa, they used an approach called transitional justice, which is really the principles of which the bereaved families embodies. And transitional justice is a hybrid of human rights law and conflict resolutions. And it's actually what one of the Palestinian women who started crying in the meeting said, because I need peace, I need to talk about my pain. So transitional justice has those truth and reconciliation commissions where it allows people to talk about the past and the history and the pain and then move forward. So that's part of the people-to-people peace building. So that's one. So that's two. And the third thing I learned, I think, was about this post-traumatic growth idea.
How did you choose those 4 particular people?
I was very lucky, really. Rami and Bassam at the time were the Israeli and Palestinian co-directors of the organisation. And
Combatants for Peace.
No, of the bereaved families.
Okay.
So Bassam was one of the founders of Combatants for Peace, and then later he became, with Rami, the co-director of the Israeli-Palestinian Bereaved Families Organisations. I actually spoke to Robbie Demelin.
Robbie.
She suggested Meital and Bushra.
Yeah.
And, I think they're all amazing. I mean, the character arc, the change that Bushra goes through from a young woman who got married at 14 and really never left her village to becoming a peace activist who travels around the world is amazing. So I was very lucky with them. In a way, that the one I have the hardest relationship is with Bushra because she only speaks Arabic. I understand a bit of Arabic because there are real similarities with Hebrew. She only speaks Arabic. She doesn't have email even. So I've always had to have an interpreter with her. So,
Now, you call this a social impact documentary.
Yeah.
Why? Why do you? Why is
well,
it
that's
called?
a thing. I don't know. Well, that's a thing now in documentary land, social impact documentaries, which means that the films are not just kind of entertainment; they're wanting to be used as a tool. And this film is being used as a tool. It's actually been screened at universities around the world, at Nazareth College here in New York, at Denison University, at Queen's College in Ontario, at King's College in London, Monash University in Melbourne, and it's going to be more and more. I've got now a little bridge builders team in Australia that's helping me with the film, and we're looking at rolling it out to schools. You're probably aware of the recent firebombing of the synagogue in Melbourne, so things have not been easy in Australia. There's been a lot of polarisation and toxic conversation around the conflict, so I think there's a real need for using a film like this as a tool to develop respectful conversations and reduce stereotypes and enable people to see what the other is like.
And at some point, I think it's still the case, wasn't the parent circle banned in schools in Israel?
Well, this terrible government. The parents, you see in the film them going into schools. They did that for many, many years. Then the Netanyahu government banned them for going in. I think that has been turned back around somehow. They appealed. But, I mean, like as... it's not in here. It's on the film's website. I actually interviewed Rami and Bassam, I think, no, all four of them just after this government came in 2022, asking them about the reactions to the government, and they predicted everything that was going to happen. I mean, they didn't predict October the 7th, but they predicted it was going to be terrible and it would take their work decades back, and it has.
I have a whole bunch more questions, but I want to give the audience a chance to ask. So if you have a question, we have roving mics. Just raise your hand and we will come to you. Wait a minute,
Yeah.
we want to use the mic, okay, because we're recording it. Yes.
I mean, I have so many questions, but I think the most important one is how can I have other friends, family members see this movie, because it's so important, and I just want everyone to see it.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Well, as a first-time filmmaker, I'm learning about the whole world of distribution. I do have distributors. My Australian New Zealand distributor's done a great job. He's got it on TV in Australia and 2 TV stations in New Zealand and on the internet. My other distributor, who's based in Canada, has not done such a great job. She's got it on TV in Spain, and we're waiting for her to get it. So she should be selling it to TV stations in America. I don't know why she hasn't done it yet or what's happening there. I mean, she keeps on getting feedback like, we want to wait till the war in Gaza's over, and then people will be open to it. And I keep saying, but this is part of the road to helping get there. So it's not available on the internet in America at the moment.
Will it have other screenings here at film festivals? And
it has screened at a lot of film festivals in the States, actually. In fact, I just yesterday got an email from the Philadelphia Jewish Film Festival asking about it. So
you have a website?
Yeah, they have got a website. Yeah. And in fact, the Louisville?
Yep,
Louisville. Yeah, they're screening it, I think, in February.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I wish it could be more readily available.
Yeah, it's really important.
I mean, it's kind of, I'm in touch with some of the Hillel directors and the university people to see if they want to use it on universities.
But it needs to be streamed. It's just a really important film. Other questions from the audience right over here?
Sorry. Thank you.
Hi, I was in Israel this summer, and one of the things that shocked me...
In the summer, I was there around then too, yeah?
...was that Israelis, even on the left, they didn't have the space in their hearts to empathize with what was going on in Gaza.
Yep.
And is this the result of trauma? I mean, I know they're sort of cut off from the news, but psychologically, it was so troubling.
I agree with you. It is very troubling. It is the issue. We all know that they're not showing what's happening in Gaza on Israeli TV much at all. But I think Israelis are also so overwhelmed with their own sense of trauma. I mean, in the last 24 hours, another 7 soldiers died. And, you know, we probably all know Israel is such a connected kind of society that people really feel that. You look at the photos of those young kids and you feel that could be my son. So they're dealing with that trauma. They're dealing with the hostages still there. They're dealing with the north evacuated. They're dealing with still the horrors of October the 7th. So I think they do feel it, but they're just kind of overwhelmed and don't have that much availability, which is really a problem. I agree. I think it's a problem.
Speaking of October 7th, had you finished your filming before October 7th, and you just
added? Yeah. So the film originally came out in March 2022.
Okay.
And
so you added the October 7th. Yeah.
I did want to answer the question of somebody about has it been shown in Israel?
Yes.
Because that's important.
Has it been shown in Israel?
Yes. So my husband and I were in Israel for 6 weeks in May, and it showed then in a cinema. It showed when it first came out in 2022. It showed, and then it showed in May, and then a women's group in the Galil, an Israeli-Palestinian women's group, showed it. Standing Together are planning to show it. So that's good. I did reach out to television stations there, but I don't think I'm going to have any luck this time with that.
One more question from the audience, or go ahead. Right here.
Please wait for the mic.
Oh, you got one up back there, sorry. Go ahead.
Spectacular. Thank you so much. I have a fantasy that you, the representative from ALMEP, would say more about ALMEP and consider your film organization as a nonprofit becoming a member of ALMEP so that they can get help with distribution, because it's really quite urgent.
I think it is urgent. The Alliance Middle East Peace, which is a very under-the-radar organization, is an umbrella, as I mentioned, of 160 different peace-building organizations. When I say that to people, they don't believe that there are 160 either shared society or cross-border organizations. But the sad truth is we were supposed to have a board meeting in Israel in February, but because we want to bring Palestinians and Israelis together, we're having it in Northern Ireland instead, because we want to learn from their horrific history, but has a little better outcomes. So
Can I say
go
one
ahead.
thing
Yes,
about
please.
the Northern Ireland and Transition
Yeah.
Group? I'm sure you know this, but in terms of people-to-people peace-building programs, $44 per person was spent in Northern
That's
Ireland
right.
compared to $1.50 in Israel and the
That's right.
Palestinian territories. And then that great American program, MEPA, which you
MEPA, the
probably-
Middle East Partnership Act, the Nita Lowey Act, which ALMEP lobbied for, and $250 million of USAID money has been being put in. It was actually signed into law by Trump before he left office. We are cautiously optimistic that it will be continued, but in its place, we're working internationally to develop an international monetary fund that the G7 is supporting, and Britain and Germany and France have already signed on to. So it will continue, but it's a tough uphill
Well, it's all,
struggle.
I really think it's all gone backwards. And
But this is going to go forward.
yes,
I'm an optimist. One last question,
Thank you. I
which
was
is...
trying to,
Are we
represent-
done?
One last question.
Okay,
I just,
one last
because
question.
I do want to
Yeah,
say,
go ahead.
I do feel these two societies are so traumatized, and they need our support to heal. I don't think they're going to be able to do it on their own. They really
Right,
need
and as we
support.
heard earlier today, and every day that I've been here over the weekend, there are 7.5 million Israeli Jews living on the land. There are 7.5 million Palestinians living on the land, and no one is going anywhere. So we better figure it out.
Nancy,
Thank
thank you
you,
so much
Esther.
for leading this conversation. Can you all hear me? Yeah. Esther, thank you so much for being here and for sharing this film with us. Folks, thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for being here all week. Tomorrow night, closing night. Tell your friends, last chance. And we look forward to seeing you at other screenings. Have a good night. Get home safe.